Hello. Welcome back to the iLog channel. My name is Casey, and thank you so much for joining me for today's video, where I'm going to be talking about this thing. Or rather, its successor. Now, the Nintendo Switch is approaching almost into its 8th year of its life. And rumors about a successor to the Switch have been going around probably since it released, though those rumors have taken far more legitimacy in the past few years. However, finally, with Nintendo confirming that we will be seeing the successor to the Switch in probably 2025, we can really start wondering about what this next system will hold. Now, there are rumors and supposed leaks galore all over the internet of what the Switch 2 or Switch successor will supposedly be like. I'm not here to discuss rumor. I'm not here to discuss leaks. Rather, I am here to discuss my own opinion of what I want to see out of the Nintendo Switch successor that would make me want to consider buying it at launch. That is to say, this is my Switch successor wish list. And quite literally, too, I actually wrote everything down for this. It's quite literally a wish list. And let's just kick things off here with my first point, the battery life. If I were to consider getting the successor to the Nintendo Switch at launch, it would have to have better or equivalent battery life to the red box Switch. If you don't know what the red box Switch is, partway through the lifespan of the Nintendo Switch, right around the time the Switch Lite released, Nintendo released a revision of the Nintendo Switch, identifiable by a change in the model number on the back of the system. This revision also came in a new box that was all red instead of the sort of picture background that the original box had. Along with the changed model number and packaging, this system also came with a modified chipset. This chipset used less power and therefore increased the battery life of the system. What I don't want to happen is to see every Switch 2, and for the rest of this video I'll just call the Switch successor the Switch 2, even though we don't know what it's going to be called yet. I don't want every Switch 2 that's bought at launch to all of a sudden become irrelevant in a few years because, there's now a revision and the battery life's better. So, if I were to consider getting the Switch 2 at launch, it would need equivalent or better battery life than the red box Switch. Now, I will emphasize equivalent or better. I mean, ideally, we'd have an improved battery life than the current Switch. However, if it ends up just being equivalent, then, hey, the battery life of the current Switch is, pretty good, all things considered. If it can at least hit those numbers, I'd be happy with that. But if it could be better, that would be awesome. The next thing on my Switch 2 wish list, which I'm sure a lot of other people are also wanting for the next console, backwards compatibility. This really is, I think, the most important thing into making sure the new Switch console, the Switch 2, whatever, actually sells. I mean, if I can't play my old Switch games on the new Switch system, I'm not really going to want to buy it at least until a year or two in so that there's actually games that are out that I can play on it. Which leads me to another point on my wish list, game patches. Now, this falls partially on Nintendo themselves to patch their own games to take advantage of the assumed increase in performance we're going to get with the Switch 2, but also on third-party developers. I mean, there are some games that could really use some improvements if the hardware allowed for those improvements to be made. Two games that immediately come to mind are the Bedrock edition of Minecraft, which notoriously doesn't run too great on the Switch with a very, very limited render distance, and Batman Arkham Knight, a complete mess of a port that honestly probably shouldn't have been made in the first place. But hey, if the Switch 2 comes along and is significantly more powerful than the Switch, maybe Warner Brothers could, throw some extra money into the team to develop a patch that would allow it to take advantage of that better hardware and actually look and run, good. And hey, Warner Brothers, while you're at it, you could put Arkham Origins on the Switch too. Just saying. And speaking of games, one of the next items on my wish list is games at launch. I want there to be games when the Nintendo Switch 2 launches. The Switch launched with Breath of the Wild, but honestly that was just a Wii U port. The first big hitting original title was Super Mario Odyssey, which came out later in the year. Now, given that we've already got Tears of the Kingdom released on the Switch, I have a feeling that the big Switch 2 launch title will probably be the next big 3D Mario. Though I have zero evidence for this, it's kind of just going off of what would make sense, though Nintendo and doing what makes sense don't always go hand in hand, so we'll see about that. And before we leave the topic of games, I want to throw one more thing in here on my Nintendo Switch 2 wishlist. There have been a lot of rumors about there being DLSS on the Switch 2. My hope is that that is optional. Like, so incredibly optional. Like, able to just turn it off and just not have it work in games. Just be able to turn it off. If there's going to be DLSS, purely optional. Look, my TV is still 1080p. I don't have 4K. I don't need ultra high resolutions. And I'd rather see what the game is actually rendering or just have the game render at a lower resolution versus seeing an AI's interpretation of each frame of the game just to get it to run at 4K. I don't care about 4K. I want the ability to turn DLSS off if it's there. If it's not there, great. I have nothing to complain about. But if it is there, I want to be able to turn it off because I don't care about 4K or even 1440. Honestly, 1080p has been plenty for me for years now. And speaking of AI stuff, Nintendo, I don't want any artificial intelligence BS in this system. Now, Nintendo tends to operate kind of behind the curve of modern fast-hitting, what am I trying to say here? Front-of-the-line technology that's pushing the boundaries, all that. So I doubt we'll see AI integrated into the Switch 2, just because it would probably be Nintendo's next system that they would put that on. But hopefully, if Nintendo is smart, they won't put any at all. Nintendo. And hey, since the discussion has gone a bit into hardware, I want to talk a little bit about what kind of hardware I want to see with the Switch. First off, the screens. Assuming the system is going to be part portable, part dockable, like how the original Switch was, there's probably going to be a screen on the device itself. Now, Nintendo released a revision of the Switch that included an OLED screen, and a lot of people have been hoping that the Switch 2 will just come stock with an OLED screen. However, some rumors and leaks have led people to believe that it may just be an LCD. My hope is that Nintendo offers, if they're going to offer an OLED at launch at all, that it's going to be an option. Just an optional thing, like a second tier. Like you pay more money and you can get the OLED version, but you can pay less and get the LCD, because I would absolutely pay less money for an LCD. Every screen I have currently and that I've ever owned has been an LCD. I've never had an OLED, and quite frankly, I don't want my handheld system to have an OLED, all just to then dock it and go to my LCD TV and be like, wow, why would I play in docked mode when handheld looks so much better, whatever. I realize that's a bit of willful ignorance on my part, but quite frankly, I just want the option to not buy an OLED version. So I'm hoping there is an LCD option available. And speaking of screens, this is probably going to be the most out there thing I'm going to say today. There is no evidence to suggest that this kind of thing would ever exist, and quite frankly, after the failure of the Wii U, I don't see Nintendo actually doing this, but it would be really cool. And again, just to clarify, I am completely making this up. This is not a feature of the Switch 2. This is just something that I think would be really cool. Streamable output to the dock. Let me explain what I mean there. See, with the Wii U, you had the console, which would output video to the TV, and then you had the tablet thing, which would receive a wireless stream from the console and then display information on the gamepad. And all things considered, it didn't look terrible. What I'm suggesting is doing this, but in reverse. Obviously, the Switch itself is the console. The handheld, the gamepad, the tablet, whatever you want to call it, is the console. But if the dock had a unit inside of it that could receive a wireless video signal, like the Wii U gamepad, then you could use the HDMI connected to the dock, sending to your TV to get a second video image on the TV screen while holding the Switch in handheld mode. And what kind of use would a feature like this have? Well, there's one that immediately comes to mind. Nintendo has slowly been adding their older consoles to the Nintendo Switch Online service. Basically, you open up the software, there's a bunch of ROMs, and the games run in an emulator. And I think it's pretty safe to assume that Nintendo will continue to do this. Problem is, eventually, they're gonna hit the DS. And if DS games are going to make their way to the Switch, well, it'd be nice to have a way of playing them that was actually, usable. For instance, in this sort of streaming video setup, you could have the bottom screen of the DS displayed on the handheld with the touchscreen of the device, usable like the touchscreen on the DS, and then wirelessly stream the top screen signal to the dock, which would subsequently go to the TV, giving you dual screen layout. Because the only alternative I can think of is an awkward cramming where both screens, the top and bottom, will be on screen at the same time on your TV, but then how would you use the touchscreen? Nintendo would probably go with the pointer solution where you have the Joy-Con act as a pointer and then you have to constantly recalibrate it because they constantly go unaligned. And yeah, this would probably work, but it wouldn't be ideal, and I think that kind of dock streaming setup would be really cool, though I don't think Nintendo's going to do this just because I don't think they deem it a necessary addition to the cost of manufacturing and cost to the consumer for a feature that most people probably won't use and that most games wouldn't take advantage of. See the entirety of the Wii U if you want to see how developers wouldn't adequately use two screens on consoles. And yeah, screens and games are all good, but if there's nothing to display on the screen when you first turn the system on and no way to navigate to all the games, well, it's pretty pointless unless you have a decent operating system. That's right, we're talking about Switch 2 operating system wishlist here. Quite frankly, the operating system that comes with the Switch is fine, but it's also pretty abysmal in some ways. The eShop is incredibly slow, and so that's the first thing I'd like to see with the Switch 2, is just make the eShop run better. I don't know what Nintendo has to do in the back end to make that happen, but honestly, it's absurd just how slow and clunky using the eShop is. Also, I'm gonna be honest here, the layout of the home screen on the Switch is terrible. You just have all these giant icons of your games laid out just in a big line across the screen, and where those games are positioned on the screen is based on which ones you've played most recently. And if you have more games that can fit into the single allotted row on the home screen, you can go into the All Software view. This will display all your games on a grid on the screen, but this grid is pretty terrible. There are groups you can make which are sort of like folders, but unfortunately you have to enter the specific group view to look at all the different groups. What I'd rather just have is the ability to drag certain games into folders that would just show up on the grid view. Maybe you want to make a folder that contains all your Mario games. You would just drag all those in, and then there'd just be a folder in the grid view, has all the Mario games, instead of specifically having to go into the group view, leaving the total grid, which creates an issue of not always knowing what needs organizing in the grid view. If you created folders just directly on the grid page, then as you dragged different game titles into those folders, they would disappear off the grid view. However, in the current group solution to this problem, any game can be moved into any group any amount of different times. So you could, let's say, have games published by Nintendo as one group and games with Mario in them as another group. Any Mario game could fall into both of those groups, and so you would have redundancy across multiple groups, whereas if it was just folders that showed up directly on the grid page, finite amount of titles, you only have so much on the screen at once, and if a title is moved into a folder, it's in that folder, can't go anywhere else. Also, it would be nice if the size of the grid could be changed. I'd rather have smaller game icons if it meant I could have more of them displayed on screen at once. Nintendo figured that out years ago with the 3DS. You had the ability to resize the grid, and in fact, you could resize the grid differently inside of folders. The home screen could have one set of grid size, maybe a grid size that could fit all your folders on the 3DS screen. And then within each folder, you could set a specific grid size that would be perfect for whatever amount of games was stored in that folder. Nintendo literally had this figured out like a decade ago. I don't know why they've gone so backwards with the Switch home screen. And of course, I'll add on the thing that everyone's been saying for years, themes. Now, most people when they say themes probably mean like intricate game themes, maybe like a Zelda theme that could show like a Triforce in the background. All that stuff's cool, but quite frankly, I'd be okay if it was just like basic colors. I would just accept colors at this point, just something more than gray and white, because those are the two options, dark gray and white. I'd love to be able to recolor the home screen of the Switch to like a pastel pink or something, or a green or a purple, or just anything, Obviously, image-based themes that could have like licensed characters, like a Kirby theme, a Mario theme, a Zelda theme, whatever, would be cool. But quite frankly, I would just take colors at this point, Nintendo. I would just take a different color background. That would be awesome. Please and thank you. And hey, there's no reason why these kind of operating system improvements couldn't also be rolled out to the original Switch as well. Though Nintendo being Nintendo, I fully suspect that the Switch 2 will have this operating system improvement and the Switch will get left in the dust. Assuming the Switch 2 even has these operating system improvements, there's a very good chance it'll launch and it'll be just like the Switch, which would be admittedly kind of disappointing. And with that, it looks like I've come down to just one more point on my Nintendo Switch 2 wish list. And well, it's improved controllers. In the 4 years I've owned my Nintendo Switch, I've been lucky enough to not experience stick drift with the Joy-Cons that came with my system. However, many other Nintendo Switch owners have not been this lucky, and Joy-Con drift, as the phenomenon has been labeled, has been rampant throughout the systems. Nintendo, you need to make the joysticks of the next system better. This cannot be happening. I could understand joysticks breaking on 20-year-old hardware that someone has just been keeping running for all those years, but the Switch is 7 years old and Joy-Cons have been drifting for most of those. This is not good, and I hope that you understand this. The joystick drift needs to end here and now. And hey, if we're going on improving the controllers for the next system, it'd be really cool? Analog triggers. Most every other system has had analog triggers since they were first introduced. Nintendo dropped them after the GameCube. I don't know why. I don't understand it. Nintendo. Analog triggers. That's it. That's it. I don't think there was anything else. Anyway, it's not like Nintendo's actually gonna make any major changes to the Switch 2 at this point. It's supposedly set to be announced later this year with an assumed release in 2025. They're probably in the finalizing stages of productions. Anything I say here isn't going to change their mind. But, this video was more about my hopes and dreams and how Nintendo will inevitably crush them because they're Nintendo and they just love to do the weirdest things that don't make any sense. Either way, I am hopeful for the Switch 2, and if it's, possible, I'll probably get one at launch, if it's legitimately worth it. If I can play all my old games, and the battery life is good, and games get patches that take advantage of the improved hardware. The rumors say that it's going to be somewhere in power, performance, whatever, a little bit more powerful than a PS4, but not as powerful as a PS5. I mean, can you imagine that? Like, a system that powerful, that small? I mean, I know PC handhelds have taken the world by storm, but I still think the Switch is such a cool concept. And I'm just hopeful that this successor system ends up being as good as the wait for it seems to have been long. What are your hopes for the Switch 2? What's your Switch 2 wish list? Drop a comment down below and let me know. I'm genuinely interested to see what other people have in mind for this system that I haven't even been able to think of. Or just let me know what you thought of my Switch 2 wishlist. Am I insane? Am I asking too much from Nintendo, that poor struggling company? Or do you agree with everything I said? Either way, let me know. And if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like. It really helps out the channel when you do that. And if you want to see more of the content that I'm making on this channel, you could click the subscribe button. Maybe even check the notification bell. Ooh, a little bit of that, huh? It can be fun. I try to keep things pretty enjoyable around here. I have a variety of content, Maybe you'll find something you like and hey, stick around for the ride. Just recently, the channel passed 1,000 subscribers and wow. Honestly, I'm amazed. Thank you to everyone who's been subscribing. And I hope you'll continue to join me on this journey that is this channel. And with all that being said, thank you so much for watching. I'm Casey from the iLog channel, and this is me signing out. Bye now.